Evan sat quietly, gripping his journal tightly, reflecting on the strange and haunting memories from his childhood. 13 years ago, when he was just 7 years old, he asked his mother why his father never attended his school's parent night like Tommy and Kaylee's fathers did. His mother's answer was cryptic, telling him that he already knew the reason. At school, his teacher, Ms. Boswell, assigned a task to the class to draw what they wanted to be in the future. Evan's drawing was bizarre. He had sketched 2 people being killed. He didn't even remember making the drawing. His mother grew worried and took him to the hospital for tests. The doctor advised her to have Evan keep a journal to help him remember what was happening. Evan began writing about his confused thoughts. One entry mentioned how his mother was taking him to meet Kaylee and Tommy, hoping to see what a father's love was like. That was when Andrea, Evan's mother, saw him holding a knife. When she asked, he dropped it, not understanding why he had it, claiming he didn't remember. Later, George, a man Evan had known, took care of him and Kaylee. But things turned dark quickly. George filmed them in a disturbing video, and Evan couldn't remember how it happened. All he knew was that he saw Kaylee upset and Tommy angry. The doctor assured Andrea that Evan didn't have any brain-related issues. These blackouts seemed to be stress-related, possibly linked to his complex feelings about his father. Andrea decided to take Evan to see his father, Jason, who was in a psychiatric hospital. They administered sedatives to Jason, and he briefly spoke with Evan. But during their conversation, Evan experienced another blackout and saw Jason angrily pressing his hands around Evan's neck. Security intervened, killing Jason in the process to save Evan. They attended Jason's funeral, but Evan's mind was still clouded by these strange blackouts. Years passed, and Evan, Tommy, Kaylee, and their friend Lenny grew older. One day they hid from George and discovered an explosive device. Tommy suggested they place it in the mailbox and wait for the explosion, but Evan experienced another blackout. When he came to, the disaster had struck, and Lenny was injured. When Andrea asked Evan what had happened, he couldn't remember. All he knew was that the last thing he recalled was closing Kaylee's ears with his hands before the blackout. Evan's doctor tried hypnosis to help him recall his missing memories, but when he tried to remember, he suffered a severe nosebleed. Afterward, he couldn't remember anything. Kaylee told him he was lucky he didn't remember certain things, but Evan began to notice the toll it was taking on her. George had beaten Kaylee, and Tommy had punched another boy, scaring Evan even more. Evan's life seemed to spiral into chaos. He and Kaylee went to the forest one day and saw Tommy burning Evan's dog alive. They tried to stop him, but Tommy was enraged and beat both Kaylee and Evan. When Evan woke up, he saw Kaylee and Lenny crying over the burnt dog. Andrea decided to move them both to a new place to escape the turmoil. 7 years later, when Evan was 21, the blackouts stopped. He was at a club when he met a girl who found his childhood journal. As they chatted, she pulled it out, and Evan started reading the journal aloud. As he read about the explosive incident and Tommy burning the dog, time seemed to rewind, and Evan found himself back in his 7-year-old body, reliving those traumatic moments. Tommy beat Evan, accusing him of choosing Kaylee over him. Evan woke up again in the present, feeling disoriented. He went to Lenny, hoping to get answers, but Lenny was traumatized and angry with him. Evan continued reading his journal, but the memories were fragmented. He then found himself back at the explosion, reliving it when he placed his hands on Kaylee's ears. The explosion occurred, and he woke up again in his room. He asked his mother if Jason had ever recalled his lost memories, but Andrea told him that Jason had mentioned he recalled things, but he couldn't tell if they were real or imagined. To seek clarity, Andrea took Evan to a fortune teller, who gave Evan a chilling message. He had no lifeline and didn't belong here, which deeply worried Andrea. Evan went to Kaylee's place and saw that she was living a life filled with abuse. Kaylee revealed that Tommy was in juvenile detention and she had emancipated herself from George at 15. Evan asked about the disturbing movie George had made of them, but Kaylee grew angry and accused him of abandoning her. Evan receives devastating news from Tommy. Kaylee had cried all night and tragically took her own life because of him. Overcome with guilt, Evan visits her grave, leaving a flower and a note expressing his hope to return one day. He reads his journal, recalling a time when George made him strip down, and suddenly Evan finds himself transported to George's house in the past. George tells both Evan and Kaylee to take off their clothes, but Evan, furious, scolds George. He warns him that if he treats Kaylee badly, she might end up taking her life, urging George to change his ways. Evan also tells George to teach Tommy a lesson. Evan wakes up in the future, and to his surprise, things are different. His memories have changed, and now he's beside Kaylee, and they are a happy couple. He asks Kaylee about the video footage George had taken, but she doesn't get angry. However, Evan notices his behavior has worsened. Despite this, he proposes to Kaylee, and just as they are celebrating, Evan's friend informs him that someone hit his car. They realize it was Tommy, who had been released from jail. Evan learns from Kaylee that her father never abused her, but it was Tommy who had been cruel. As Evan and Kaylee walk back, Tommy suddenly attacks Evan. They fight, and in the struggle, Evan accidentally kills Tommy. He's arrested and tortured by fellow prisoners. Evan asks his mother to bring him his journals, and she brings 2 of them. She also tells him that she's working on his release. However, the thugs rip up his journals, leaving him with only a few torn pages. With help from a man, Evan manages to read the journal, traveling back to a time when they were at Tommy's house, where he was burning a dog. Evan convinces Lenny to confront Tommy, but Lenny ends up killing him. Evan wakes up in a hostel room with new memories. At a doctor's appointment, he learns that he has a brain hemorrhage. Evan later visits Lenny in jail, and Lenny asks him if he knew this was going to happen, saying that Evan should have been the one in jail instead of him. Evan reads more of his journal and travels back to meet Jason when he was 7. Jason tells Evan that he wishes things could have ended differently, but it's too late for that. Jason presses Evan's neck, and Evan wakes up. He goes to see Kaylee, fearing she may be dead, but finds that she is now depressed and distant. Evan shares his memories with her, telling her about her likes and dislikes and how they once were happy together. He explains the time travel, but Kaylee gets angry, telling him to undo the changes and save the lady and baby. Evan travels back to the explosion incident. This time Tommy saves the lady, but the explosion still happens, and Evan wakes up in the hospital with no arms. Kaylee and Lenny are now together, taking care of Evan. Seeing them together, Evan tries to take his life, but Tommy saves him. They go to see Andrea, and Evan learns that his mother has lung cancer. She urges him not to try to change anything. With Lenny's help, Evan finds his journal and travels back to the moment of the explosion. He tries to stop it, but Kaylee unknowingly holds the device, causing the explosion to happen. Evan wakes up in the hospital once again, and a doctor tells him that the journals were just a fantasy created by his mind to cope with the guilt of Kaylee's death. The doctor reveals that Evan has a disease and has no chance of recovery. Evan runs away, hiding and writing a final note, saying that if anyone finds it, he is dead. He wishes he could go back to the beginning to save Kaylee and the baby. He watches videos of his mother when she was pregnant with him, and in one last effort, he travels back inside her womb. But Evan dies there because he was never meant to exist. He had no soul, no lifeline. Andrea takes care of Tommy and Kaylee like her own children.